Trust me guys, the thumbnail will make a lot more sense after this. How you doing guys? Welcome back to Rewind Reviews. Today we're going to be doing a movie from 2022 and that is Bullet Train. Directed by David Leitch, written by Zach Olkowitz, and based on the book by Kōtarō Isaka, the movie follows 5 assassins aboard a fast-moving bullet train finding out that their missions have something in common. It also features an all-star cast including Brad Pitt, Joey King, Aaron Taylor-Johnson, Brian Tyree Henry, Andrew Koji, Hiroyuki Sanada, Michael Shannon, Sandra Bullock, Zazie Beetz, Bad Bunny and Logan Lerman. So if you're like me at all, you probably have gone to the cinema quite a few times over the past year, and chances are you've probably been pretty bombarded with the trailers for this movie. I don't think there's actually been a single movie outside of like the younger kids things that have actually not featured this trailer at all, because it just seems to be absolutely everywhere. The marketing department's just gone into overdrive. But from everything that I've seen, I was definitely starting to get a bit more interest in it. I really liked the cast, I really liked the look of it, I liked who was involved, the premise seemed really good, so I decided, yeah, well, when it came out, I want to give it a go. One of the biggest draws for this movie is quite easily the cast, which is pretty stellar compared to a lot of big movies that have been coming out, and especially David Leitch's connections to all these different franchises that he has been a part of. It definitely has brought a lot of those cast members back to be part of this. And it's very clear everybody is having an absolute blast doing this movie. I really love Brad Pitt's inclusion in this, the way that he's just sort of filling in for somebody, so he's just kind of caught up in all this madness that's going on, but he can sort of hold his own. So there's some pretty interesting action sequences with him. I really love the Tangerine and Lemon characters. Honestly, they're probably the best characters of this movie by far. I love the chemistry between Aaron Taylor-Johnson and Brian Tyree Henry. They're really great together, they really bounce off each other, and honestly I think I'd love to see a spin-off with them if there's ever a possibility of that. Not all the characters really get too much development. You get a little bit of their backstory or sort of like their reasoning for why they're on this train in the first place, and everyone does feel very unique. They've all got their own little quirks and kind of personalities that really do contrast to one another, like, especially like with the way that they sort of handle themselves, because there is a big variety of action sequences that do include these different quirks that these characters have. So you've got people who are a bit more brutal and some of those fights are quite full on, but then you've got others who are a bit more subtler and sort of work and sort of play off other people to sort of get them to do what they want. I do think that everybody is genuinely great in this movie, even the people who don't really get too much screen time, even like Logan Lerman and Zazie Beetz. Like, they get enough to be sort of aware of what it is that they're about and why it is that they're in this movie. I feel a bit sorry for Logan Lerman. You'll understand when you see the movie, but I really do like what they do with him. I love what they do with Zazie Beetz. I love what they do with pretty much every character in it. It is really great, and they all have a really good connection to each other. I mean, without getting into spoilers, there are definitely a few cameos and a few surprises that did kind of catch me off guard. They are well handled. One of them is on par with like Brad Pitt showing up in Deadpool 2. It's definitely along those lines. They are pretty good. I like where they're included, and it does add to the surprises that are in this movie. The story is incredibly simple. It is literally just these different assassins who are all sort of on this train to fulfill their own mission. So you've got some who are trying to protect someone, you've got someone who's trying to steal a briefcase, you've got others who are there to kill someone else. There's all these interconnected stories that are all sort of crisscrossing together. So the basic premise of it is very simple, and it lends itself very much to an action movie. It's a great premise for an action movie, but it is a lot more twistier than you might think. It can be a little bit messy at times. There's definitely a few elements that are a little bit convoluted, because one of the big things that they do is there isn't necessarily one primary protagonist throughout this movie. It's sort of billed as a Brad Pitt movie. I don't really think it is. It kind of starts with him, but he's not really the main character. Everybody has their own story and reason for why they're in this train and what it is that they're doing in this train, and each of these stories do have their own kind of enough screen time so it all feels quite like a proper ensemble. But one of the issues is that when you have so many of these different characters, that yeah, the focus can get a little bit jumbled at times, and it doesn't help that it jumps around in time a lot. And I don't necessarily mean like just like on the train itself. It's like you've got characters who sort of mention something that happened in the past, and then it sort of flashes back to this moment. So you've got like Tangerine and Lemon talking about this big mission that they had years ago, so it sort of cuts back to them, sort of shows what happened. Then you've also got other characters who've got other things going on, and it sort of flashes back to those. And even though I do like how it does knit together and it does provide a good solid reason for what it is that's going on, it can make it a little bit hard to follow at times. This could be a movie where you say, oh, just sort of sit back and just switch your brain off. It's not really like that. This is a movie that does demand your attention. You do have to focus on what's going on, because there's a lot of setups very early on, and there's a lot of payoffs that you probably might not understand what it is if you aren't aware of the setups beforehand. So it is very cleverly done. I do like where all those little setups are done and how they are paid off later on. But there are so many things going on at any point in time that it can sort of make you go like, oh God, I don't remember. Oh yeah, no. So there are definitely a lot of little flashbacks and little things like that interspersed in what's going on, like in the present day, that sort of calls back to what happened just a little bit earlier, so you're sort of reminded of the setups. So that's why I sort of feel like it can be a little bit messy at times. And there are definitely a few little conveniences, as I said, throughout this that I think just sort of suspend your disbelief a little bit when you're watching this. It's not a very grounded movie in any way, shape or form. It does fit the tone, it does kind of fit like the comedic elements of this movie, because this is very much an action comedy. And when it comes to the comedy, it's okay. It's a bit hit and miss. It's not this like hilarious comedy. If you've seen the trailers, you've kind of got a really good idea of the sort of comedy that's in this movie. I do have a bit of a soft spot for those kind of movies where it's like everything sort of goes wrong and it kind of works out at the end. It's one of those kind of movies, especially when it comes to like Brad Pitt's character who's called Lady Bird. It is really clever how some of his comedy does work, but as I said, it's just not really hilarious as I was sort of hoping it would be. The stuff with Tangerine and Lemon, their stuff is quite funny, and as I said, the chemistry between them is great. Their comedy is actually really good, and I did promise that the thumbnail would make a bit more sense after this. There is like this running joke between Tangerine and Lemon that involves Thomas the Tank Engine. I won't necessarily say how or why it ties into the plot in some way, but it is used actually quite well. I thought it was just going to be like a bit of a throwaway joke that was just sort of there, but I wasn't really expecting it to really sort of have like the payoff that it did, and I think that's why I keep saying that the payoffs are actually pretty good and the setups actually work really well. For the most part, the action's kept quite brief. There's a few little brief bursts of it here and there, sort of liven things up, and it is handled very well. It is the same director who worked on John Wick and Deadpool 2. He knows how to handle action sequences, and they are really well done. They're choreographed really well. There's a lot of variety to them. I think there's a lot of imagination that's gone into with them as well, and the way that they sort of integrate a lot of the comedic elements as well. It is rated a 15 in the UK. It's rated an R over in the US, so it is definitely violent. It's not something that little kids should be seeing, but it is really good. It is executed really well. It's not too violent. It's not overly graphic in the way that I was sort of expecting it to be, but it's just right for a movie like this, where it's sort of over the top but not too much. But with that being said, some of it, especially the third act, I feel goes a little bit way too over the top, to the point where it quite literally goes off the rails. It's just such an insane third act. I've seen a couple reviewers mention that there is the potential for the movie to kind of wrap up at a certain point, because it seems like a really pretty perfect ending. And thinking back on the movie, I can actually see where they're coming from, and I actually do think that it could have been a really good idea. But the third act is kind of where everything gets revealed and all the secrets and everything is sort of like brought out into the open. But it is on top of that this really over the top sequence, and I don't know, it just feels very different from what we sort of had up until this point. There were definitely over the top moments sprinkled throughout, but it never really sort of went as far as the third act does. Even though it is really enjoyable, it is a really fun sequence, I do think that maybe they could have just toned it down a little bit. But as I said, it is still shot really well. I think everything is edited nicely. I think the way that everything does work is really good. Even like the flashbacks, it never sort of feels too jarring that they're doing these flashbacks, because there's enough of a segue into what it is that happens. Plus, if you've seen John Wick and Deadpool 2, you're aware of David Leitch's kind of visual style. It's got like sort of like a neon sort of backdrop, and there's lots of colourful lights and everything, so it looks great. I genuinely love how visual it is, especially with like the setting, the way that it's quite claustrophobic and you can't really sort of get anywhere. It's really nice. I do think that it is really good looking movie. You know, I don't think the movie would have been as exciting if it was set here in the UK. You know, the sequences rely on them being at these stations at these exact times, and then having like the announcers saying, "I'm sorry, but the train is being cancelled today, or it's been delayed 2 hours." Yeah, we don't have the best public transport. Anyway, I was kind of surprised how many visual effects they actually use in this movie. I was kind of expecting it for like just the backgrounds and like a few of the shots of like the train going up and down the tracks, but there is a bit more than I really thought that there was going to be, and it's a bit 50-50. It is from Sony Imageworks, I think the name is. It looks fine. There are definitely some scenes that it does look really good, it does look very believable, but then there's others where it just doesn't quite work. Like, there's a few external shots of the train, and there's a few things that are sort of going on around it. It's not great. There's a few platform sequences as well. It's just... It could look a little bit better. And I said the movie does rely a little bit on suspension of disbelief, and with the very over-the-top third act and the way that the effects do sort of look a bit 50-50, there is definitely one sequence where I was just like, oh, that doesn't look good. But, you know, it's fine. It doesn't take you out of the movie, it doesn't distract you. A majority of it does look pretty good, and it does enhance a few of the sequences, especially when it comes to like some of the action scenes. It does work quite well, and I think that there is probably a lot more effects work that's gone into this than you probably aren't aware of. So it is 50-50. Most of it does look fine. There's just a few things that they could have tweaked here and there. We also have a soundtrack from Dominic Lewis, and I actually quite like the soundtrack for this movie. It's not too overpowering, it's not very like orchestral or anything like that, but it's got a nice sort of blend of different sort of flavours here and there. There's definitely a few little rock elements here and there, and I liked it. It did sound actually pretty nice. It really fits the tone and style that they're going for, and it really sort of adds to that in a way, and that does extend to a lot of the songs that they use as well. There's definitely a few that you will definitely recognise. They did use Staying Alive from the trailer. It fits, it works for the film, it works for the story. I don't necessarily think that all the songs are quite like you're going to automatically think of this movie when you hear those songs, but they do fit very well. And I say, this is quite a very slick movie, and I do feel like the songs, the music does work very well for that, and it does add to that. Overall, I had fun with it. I think it is a fun movie. I think it is definitely something that you will enjoy if you do see it. There's a really great premise, there's some good action sequences, it can be quite funny at times. I do think this is something that people will enjoy if they see it. I don't necessarily think this is a must-see movie, and even though it is in cinemas, and I'm always somebody who says, you know, if it's available in the cinema, go and see it in the cinema. I don't necessarily think that this is one that you have to see on the big screen, but it wouldn't hurt. It's also one of those movies that I think does kind of benefit from maybe watching it one more time, which I am thinking of doing eventually when it does get released on home release. So yeah, it is pretty fun, it is enjoyable. I do think there are some great elements to it, especially the cast and the action, things like that. I do think this is something that is worth a watch. So with all that being said, I had fun. It's not the best movie of the year, but I did enjoy it. So with all that being said, I'm going to give this movie a 7 out of 10. I don't know if this movie will be getting like a follow-up or anything, but honestly, I'll definitely take a spin-off with Tangerine and Lemon any day. So that's pretty much everything I've got to say for today, so thank you so much for watching. Please like, please subscribe, share this out if you want. Make sure you hit the notification button as well so you keep up to date on everything going on this channel. Let me know down in the comments what you thought of the movie, if you've seen it, did you like it, did you not? What sort of tank engine character are you? I never thought I'd ever say that in a review. Also, if you have any suggestions for any movies, TV shows and games that you'd like me to take a look at and do a rewind review for, let me know down in the comments. Thank you once again for watching, and I'll see you next time on Rewind Reviews. See you guys.